Federal Correctional Investigator Ivan Zinger sees injustices daily.
So when you're talking about socioeconomic, political, cultural rights, I think Aboriginal people do not have the same status in Canadian society.
Ivan Zinger is talking about the overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples in prisons. Although Indigenous people only make up 4% of the Canadian population, they make up nearly a quarter of all inmates.
For me, the #1 human rights issue in Canada, that the incarceration rate for Indigenous people keeps climbing year after year after year, unrelentlessly.
Year after year, the Federal Correctional Investigator of Canada tables a report outlining the overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples in prisons. Year after year, things get worse.
Indigenous people are released much later in their sentences than non-Aboriginal, most of them at statutory release, which means at 2/3 of their sentence. They are in higher security, typically. They're more likely to be in segregation, and then when they do go out, they're more likely to be suspended or revoked.
And that use of segregation, particularly maximum security wards for women, is also worrisome for Zinger.
The close and cramp living arrangement can escalate tension, frustration, and conflict among these women.
Zinger believes the government is missing the mark. He believes policies should focus on rehabilitation rather than punishment.
The environment, again, is not therapeutic and does not employ a trauma-informed approach which is required to help these women.
These issues are nothing new for Savannah Gentile at the Elizabeth Fry Societies of Canada.
It often feels like we are advocating to deaf ears.
The Elizabeth Fry Society advocates for women in prison. They believe prisons are a temporary Band-Aid solution.
If we could begin to address these issues at their root, if we could invest in affordable housing, invest in guaranteed livable income, then we would start to address some of the issues that lead to women being criminalized in the first place.
Today, Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale responded to the concerns in a statement, saying his government has invested $65 million for healing and rehabilitation and $57 million for mental health supports. The correctional investigator does have recommendations to reduce the number of Indigenous peoples in prisons. He'd like to see more spiritual and cultural programs, as well as a Deputy Commissioner for Aboriginal Corrections. In Ottawa, Nigel Newlove, City News.